moving together using the similar means and perhaps looking for similar alternatives, mainly livelihoods and employment. Mobility in the region occurs largely within the region, but we also have migration to the Gulf countries. We also have migration using the European Union, and more closely, we have migration towards the southern part of Africa. Just so, again, it's mainly because of employment and income differentials, so people trying to look out for their livelihoods. In terms of the impact of COVID on migration, I'll say one, with the onset of the COVID pandemic and the first cases in the region, of course, governments in the region largely responded in similar ways to the way other governments responded, in terms of lockdown, in terms of travel ban. And in terms of these, those who are mostly affected were those in the urban areas. And again, IGAD is so unique in the sense that the most resilient migrants are usually in the urban areas. And it's not just migrants, even the most resilient refugees are the ones who are in the urban areas. Those are the ones who are able to find employment, require limited support, and are able to support themselves and the families, and perhaps almost send remittances to their families back home. So when the lockdown came, of course, majority of those who are the most resilient ones are the ones who lost their jobs. They're the ones who lost their livelihoods. They're the ones who are mostly affected by COVID. But over and above that, in terms of the regional dynamics, again, there are some things that came into play. One, from the onset, there was the fear of the foreigner, mainly the narrative that the foreigners were the ones who are spreading the virus. And therefore, there was some tendency to point out at migrants and point out at those who are not considered natives as the perpetrators or those who are spreading the virus. And that in itself also played to the vulnerability of the migrants themselves, whereby most of them were targeted and they could not move over and above the restrictions. We also had a lot of deportations, largely within the region, countries in the region. So you'd have neighboring countries trying to deport migrants of a certain country. So you want to take them back to where they came from, largely because you thought they were the ones who were spreading the virus.
Internal and external dimensions of policy. Internal is essentially the free movement and mobility provisions that are a kind of founding principle of the European Union dating back to the 1950s and realised through the 1960s and subsequently with important legal developments which provide rights of free movement for EU citizens. More recent on the scene has been measures applied to non-EU citizens, and in particular, I think what's developed since the 1990s is what will be called an external dimension of migration and asylum policy, and that's particularly relevant in relation to what Charles was just talking about from the IGAD perspective and also from African Union perspective, the implications of the external dimension of EU migration policy for non-member states. And I think the big issue here, the relationship between internal and external policy in the European Union is mediated by the idea of solidarity between EU member states. An absence of solidarity or an effective absence of solidarity between EU member states has, I think, led to a greater emphasis on offloading or externalizing migration policy to non-member states. And so that's a kind of point about policy. My third point is about politics, and I think this is really crucial in the European Union, the kind of politics of migration. Immigration has been politicised in the European Union. By politicised, I mean it has been salient, so it's been an important topic of public debate, and the debate has also been polarised between opponents of immigration and those who are more supportive of immigration. So that level of politicisation, I think, has been an important dynamic in Europe.
Hello, everybody.
Sir, it is working now.
Hello.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening to you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I think Sir William has to join. So
William is yet to join.
I am here already.
okay.
Okay. That's everybody is in time.
Sada, you can tell me when to start and I'll start.
We already another 1 minute, William, just to can start. 5:30, 5:29.
Can I take this 1 minute to informally, before we start, to say hello? This is Nahida
Yes,
Smith,
ma'am.
Bangladesh
Yes,
Ambassador
yes.
to Jordan. It's very good to see you, William, after such a long time. And I hope all of you are doing very well amidst this COVID situation. It's really good to see you, William, and touch base after such a long time.
It is likewise, madam, likewise.
And
Thank you.
hello to our moderator.
Thank you. Nice to see you,
I'm
Nashida.
really delighted and honored to join you. Thank you for
Yeah.
inviting.
Wonderful, wonderful. You're based in Jordan right now, is it?
Yes, I'm based in Jordan now.
Wonderful. That's a nice place. I was in Syria for 3 years.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I had the opportunity of visiting. It's a beautiful country,
It is indeed.
though perhaps a bit dry as compared to Bangladesh, but
Very much.
nevertheless, yeah, it's great.
Yes, it's great, good to be here.
Yeah, wonderful.
So I think it's 5:30 now. We can start.
All right, so then I will begin. I'd like to thank everybody for joining this conversation. I'd like to begin by saying from the beginning that we look forward to this being one of the many conversations that we will have around this issue. We do know that over the years, the missions have begun to play a very prominent role in the life of labor migration. There is a perspective from many on the ground as well that the deployment, remittances of migrant workers, this has taken a lot of the focus within labor migration governance as compared to, let us say, the role that missions play in this in labor migration governance. What is the role of the state in protecting its citizens wherever they are, especially overseas? We know from past that there are many challenges in relation to this, particularly with countries of origin that have huge populations of migrants in a country, in any country of destination. Issues like being understaffed, not enough people to carry on the services that are expected from the embassy. Sometimes it might be an issue of capacity as well. There also been issues of growth of different kinds of stuff. So we've had labor attaches, and we now have social welfare officers, and we have different kind of personnel development in missions that we are currently looking at. But we also have this question of an all of government approach. Where does Labor Ministry of Country of Origin come in, and where does Foreign Ministry of Country of Origin come in that kind of collaboration or protection of rights of migrant workers or of their citizens? There are, and a lot of this role that is played out by missions as well in these times has become critical for so many populations of migrant workers across the region. What are some of the challenges that we particularly see during this time? And while in this webinar today, we will focus on some of these challenges, I know we have seen, well, I would like to dare to say that a lot of these challenges have only been exasperated by some of the issues that were persisting even before the COVID. So, and this is something we might want to look into. In the panel today, we have for us a very good panel set up. It brings different perspectives. That will be from people who have ambassadors and working in missions, but also from civil society that have a rich and large experience in engaging with missions. And for us, it would be important to see how do we take this conversation forward. This is and this must be a new conversation, particularly from a country of origin perspective. And how can we look at this as the start of a conversation moving forward to see how can countries of origin play an even more bigger role or a greater role in the protection of the rights of its citizens? Would we dare, coming out of this COVID, be willing to start a conversation of a new role for missions? Particularly knowing that in very many countries we have huge numbers of migrant workers. And is that new role something that could be done collaboratively among countries of origin, or is it a unilateral approach among countries of origin? These are some of the questions that will come up in this conversation, which we will have today. We also look forward to everybody who is on this panel to be part of this conversation, because as the three co-organizers of this CCRM, GRFDT, and MFA, one of the things that we will be doing is to see how we can continue to engage with policymakers and academics into seeing what is the new discourse that must happen today in relation to the role of missions, particularly with country of origin missions. And what is this role in terms of with the country of origin, but also with countries of destination? How can we see in some ways a balance in terms of sharing this responsibility of governance of migration across the two regions, across two corridors? We have, I will not introduce the speakers, I'll leave it to the moderator to introduce the speakers, but we have a very good moderator with us today, Sir Mulay, who has been an ambassador of India and has a vast experience in looking at some of these issues. And we hope that this conversation will help us to take further. For all the writers, researchers who are listening today, this would be a really good moment for us also to look at this conversation and how can we take this up in our own research and in our own writing and in our own policy suggestions for the future. The three organizations, we will come out with a policy brief on this, but any inputs that the participants on this call can give in writing would be more than welcomed. For now, I will hand it over to Sir Mulay. Sir, it's forward to you.
Well, thank you very much, William. Welcome all of you, particularly Dr. Sadanand Sahu, Ms. Raula Hamati, and my friend Mr. Shabri Nair, the very distinguished panelists. Let me welcome you to this very interesting webinar on the roles of our missions, in these very difficult times of COVID-19 and beyond. These are absolutely extraordinary times. We have seen that the mark crossed is already 13 million, whether it's an advanced country like USA, which is adding 65,000 patients every day, or India, which is adding about 28,000 additional patients every day. We are going through an extraordinary situation. In our lifetimes, I don't think we have seen something like this. Now, for us, what is important is in these very difficult circumstances, how do we plan when we don't know how deep we are in the tunnel and whether actually there is going to be any light at the end of it? As of now, no vaccine and no treatment is available. But nevertheless, we'll have to work. And in these situations particularly, I realized three things that should have happened have not happened. Correct me if I'm wrong. Number one, we thought that this is a very globalized world and there will be a globalized response. I don't think there has been a proper coordinated approach and a global response to the COVID-19. I also felt that whether it is the regional blocs or bilateral collaboration and cooperation or the international organizations, we do not seem to have a strong leadership in leading this particular effort. Are you not able to hear? Are you okay? Okay. In these situations, what happens typically is those who are vulnerable really have to suffer the most, and migrant laborers or migrant workers have to suffer the most. That is what my primary observation is. We also realize that we are awfully inadequate in terms of preparation to handle this kind of health crisis, despite having several regional, bilateral, and other fora that we have with us. As someone who has worked in the Indian mission abroad, I can say that even the most well-equipped missions also cannot handle the situation that we are currently facing. Agreed countries of origin have started to respond better in the recent years to the grievances of migrant workers, but that still cannot be considered adequate in these situations. Countries like Philippines have looked after their workers abroad well. India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh are also adding new measures like community officers and labor attaches. But during the normal situation, things are extremely difficult. I remember in my visit, in my stay in Maldives, I had visited the prison there and found that the Indian prisoners there had not been attended by either the host government or the home country government for years. And as a result, they are languishing. Now, what happens to these people who also happen to be migrant laborers, but in the COVID times, they'll be further neglected, even though there are some measures in place. A majority of these people, of course, in their home countries also come from lowest of the low strata, economic strata. And, they do face, starting from their first thought that comes to their mind about migration, they start facing the problems, whether the recruitment agents, the visa and documentation, sometimes they get into the trafficking and other issues. And once they land there, of course, it is not that the problems are over. A new set of problems take over them. You're all experts and you're aware that starting from the agreement, change in the agreement, change in the visa status, change in the job content, salary reductions on the, on the spot, and subsequently a number of ways in which they're harassed, including bad working conditions or very, very difficult climatic conditions they work in. Of course, socially, it's very difficult for them to interact in these countries. So in the normal circumstances too, the missions face enormous difficulties. And now you have a new set of issues in COVID where interaction is extremely difficult. And the entire cycle, starting from recruitment, their placement, and if they wish to return, the entire cycle is now in jeopardy. COVID-19 has essentially unleashed instability in the labor market, complete instability. It's difficult now to recruit people. If you are to recruit, how do you get them to come? How do you interview them? How do you select them? And most of these people have no access to either online methods or things like webinar or internet, or they are not familiar. In fact, they have basic difficulties like speaking in good or proper English, or of course, certainly they are not aware of what language is spoken often in the destination countries. So in these new circumstances, you will have to come with an entirely new set of solutions. How do we do that? There are ILO guidelines. There are certain best practices that have been implemented by certain governments and their embassies in the destination countries. For example, Philippines has actually ensured a very, very smooth return of the Filipino workers who wanted to come back. But India too has brought back about 500,000 people through several hundred flights, including chartered flights from all over the country. However, there are still hundreds and thousands of people who do not wish to come back. They have issues in transition. They have issues like pay cut, loss of job, loss of shelter, loss of food, lack of any health facilities. So they are undergoing tremendous difficulties. And those who want to return, they have another set of issues, because they return and what do? As it is, they have a very precarious existence in the country of origin. When they go on their work, it's precarious situation in those countries. And now when they wish to return, particularly in COVID-19, their life has become further very, very tough and difficult. Recently, I got a call sometime in March from a person who was stuck, an Indian who was stuck in Morocco at the lounge of the airport. And he was stuck there for 82 days. I kept on calling him once in 2-3 days. But what I found remarkable is the Embassy of India in Morocco stayed in contact with him, sent his medicines to the airport, visited him once a week, and when the situation was somewhat favorable, the embassy organized a chartered flight in collaboration and cooperation with the people, other people also who were stuck in Morocco, and collected them from different points, ferried them to the airport so that they could board the chartered flight. Now, this is an enormous task, even in the normal circumstances, but you could imagine the kind of trouble that the embassy would have gone through to undertake this kind of exercise. But indeed, this is the situation on the ground level, and to go about it and how to go about it, missions are often understaffed. There are manpower issues, there are financial resource issues, and now with COVID restrictions, they'll have issues of movement, they'll have issues of their own health. I know of an Indian embassy where there are more than 8 people and their families have got are COVID infected. Now, in a situation where already you are stressed, you have more stress on your hand. But that is where the challenge lies, I believe. Countries are increasingly aware that they have to protect their migrant workers in every respect. In the recent times, as I said, countries have taken a number of measures to change the situation. In India, what we have done is we have introduced something, we have rather strengthened something called Community Welfare Fund, which is actually expected to take care of almost every need of the migrant worker. But when you have to ferry back 500,000 people, 500,000 people or more, then you have to resort to contributory measures. That has also been done. But now on, I would think that the embassy's role, the mission's role is going to be more critical than ever. They'll have to do 3 things. Number 1, they'll have to handle the current situation that they are facing. Number 2, they'll have to gaze into the future and see what exactly are the various ways to restore the entire cycle of migration, starting from recruitment, even though they are based abroad, overseas, in a country of destination, they'll have to be working very closely with the recruitment agents, the state governments back home. They'll have to also see how best they can have the pre-departure training program, how they can best brief these people in different centers. It's a task, but they'll have to undertake it in collaboration with the home governments, including the Foreign Office, Labor Ministry, and other agencies that are looking after. Number 2, they'll have to work very closely with the stakeholders. These stakeholders are many at the country of destination. These would be the local foreign ministry, health ministry, the civil aviation department, the security, the employment ministry. So with multiple agencies, including international agencies like ILO and other agencies which come in into play during these times. Third, before I close, I would say that they will have to work on short-term measures, medium-term measures, and long-term measures. Alas, we don't know what is in store for the long term, but then they'll have to be innovative, they will have to be imaginative, and they'll have to work in very close coordination, and collaboration with all the stakeholders. I believe that if this, the missions are able to do, then perhaps we could, overcome the current difficulties and would be able to look at the future in a slightly optimistic manner. Lastly, I'll just to explain the complexity, I'll just give you one example and close there. I got a call from Mumbai from a lady saying that she is COVID infected. Her daughter is COVID infected. One daughter is not COVID infected. However, she has to be at home, but she's handicapped. And the father, the head of the family, is working in the Gulf. And he needs to be brought back urgently to take care of the daughter who is handicapped and who has to be at home because she has tested COVID negative. So in these situations, embassies will have to employ very, very innovative methods to get the person back. Now, there are no flights, no ships, and yet you will have to try and see how best you can utilize the resources or create the resources in an imaginative manner to get the people back. Well, with these words, I would like to thank the organizers for this webinar, and I look forward to listening to our very, very distinguished panelists. With this in mind, may I suggest the following structure for the webinar. As you know, Mr. William has already spoken. He has handed over the mic to me, and now I have opened my conversation. I will now give the floor to the panelists in the following order. Since there are 3 government representatives and the 3 civil service society organizations, I'll alternate between the foreign ministry officials and the civil society representatives. So the order is somewhat like this. 1, Ms. Nashida Soban, Ambassador of Bangladesh to Jordan, followed by Mr. Thomas Matthew, social worker based in Kuwait, followed by Mr. Manish Gupta, India's Consul General in Sydney, Australia, followed by Ms. Sumita Krishna, advocate and solicitor, Malaysia, and then the last speaker would be Ms. Samantha Jayasurya, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Thailand. In addition to that, I have one or two minor suggestions, which will make the whole thing a little more interesting. In the first round of interventions, I shall be grateful if you could kindly limit your presentation to about 7 to 8 minutes maximum for the each interaction. In the 7th minute, if you don't mind, I'll request you to close. In your interventions, please feel free to not just highlight your perspective, but also link in and reflect on the statements made by the previous speakers in the remark. Ambassador Soban, since you will be the first speaker, you may wish to reflect on the statements made by William and to some extent myself, if you find it actually relevant. This will ensure that we are also linking the various points made by other participants. The organizing team will also be keeping a keen eye on the participants, and I understand a few eminent personalities have also registered with us. I will call on some of them to make a quick intervention. I'll engage them for about 15 to 20 minutes, which will be followed by remarks by your side again. The team and I will also monitor the chat box and will give you some of the questions raised there for your reflections towards the end of the panel. If we miss any questions, remarks, then please feel free to do so in your concluding remarks. So I envisage at least 2 sets of interventions, opening and as response to the audience from each of the panelists. At the end of the webinar, I will try to make some final remarks to wrap up, and I'll request Ms. Raula Hamati from CCRM to conclude with her vote of thanks. So this is the outline. I hope one has made it very clear. We are very keen and excited to hear your views at this interesting webinar. So may I request Ms. Nashida Soban, Ambassador of Bangladesh to Jordan.
Thank you, Ambassador Molay. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And I would like to also thank the organizers for organizing this webinar and also inviting me as a panelist. Excellency, the moderator, I would like to, I would try my best to finish in 7-8 minutes, but I have a number of areas in my mind, and that also relates to what my previous two speakers, William and also the moderator, has been talking about. But first, let me give you an idea of what the Bangladesh Embassy in Jordan has been doing since COVID virus was identified in Jordan in last February, end of February. Because the thing that this embassy has been doing resonates a lot about what the moderator has been talking about the role of embassies abroad, where there are a huge number of migrants from countries of origin. So we worked in Jordan. Bangladesh Embassy worked in 3 levels. Firstly, service. Secondly, security. And thirdly, repatriation or return. Now, in terms of service, what we did was, the first thing that we did was to engage with the recruitment agencies and also the employers, sometimes individually and sometimes in a group, to do 2 things. One is to raise awareness among the workers about how to protect themselves, and also asking the employers and also the recruitment agencies to ensure all the rights, and also hygiene and sanitation and healthcare for all the workers from Bangladesh in Jordan. And secondly, in terms of security, we engaged with the stakeholders that was mentioned by the moderator, to ensure the job security of the workers as much as possible within the law of the country of destination as well as the country of origin, and also within the contracts that the workers have. And also other security issues that we tried to engage. And I missed another thing, that is under the service sector, what we did was we identified the most vulnerable group among the migrants who needed some help, and we tried to distribute, we did distribute some food items and some other items to the most vulnerable and most destitute migrant workers that came from Bangladesh and Jordan. And we have seen that other Bangladesh embassies around the world did the same thing. And thirdly, on repatriation, those who are willing to go back and those who need to go back to the country of origin, that is to Bangladesh, we facilitated their repatriation. And in that also we are very much engaged with the employers here, because as per contract, the employers are responsible for return of the workers when they want to go back to their country of origin. So we just generated work on that regard as per the contract and also as per the law, and we engaged for the repatriation of Bangladeshis, those who want to go back to Bangladesh during this time. Now, if you look at the very recent, I think as recent as yesterday, the WHO's prediction that the COVID virus is not going to go away very soon. So we have to think about, I think a bit of a long-term situation and what can be done. And here, I listened to the moderator talking about the return and how to reinitiate the circulation of the international migration again, because we now are seeing a lot of travel barriers, a lot of airports are closed, but the thing is that it is also harming both the economy of the country of destination as well as the country of origin, and above all the migrants themselves, if the circulation of migration is barred. So we are trying to also engage with the other stakeholders, the relevant stakeholders in the country of destination, to see how we can restart the circulation of migration. a number of people have gone back, but I hear from the recruitment agencies as recent as yesterday, I had a meeting with the recruitment agencies here in Jordan, and we were talking about the difficulties they are facing. It's not only the recruitment agencies, but basically it is the employers, the factories, the different sectors where they recruit foreign workers or migrant workers, and they are facing a big challenge in that, because a lot of migrant workers who have been recruited cannot come, and also they cannot recruit anymore, but there are vacancies in number of areas and sectors, so they are also taking a look at it. And here we are trying to engage with the relevant stakeholders to see how we can start the circulation process again. Let me talk a little bit about the challenges. William mentioned that there are a huge number of challenges. Now, in terms of challenges, let me, I have chalked down listening to you too. One thing is, I think that one challenge, which has not been very evident in Jordan, but I know around the world, we see this a big challenge, the stigma that is going against the migrant workers around the world. It is everywhere. So that is a big challenge, I would say, that needs to be addressed. Secondly, a big challenge that we faced in Jordan as well, the communication challenge or the awareness among the migrants themselves, that they need to immediately consult or communicate with their missions, if there is a mission in that country of destination. Like here, we found a number of migrant workers who were not communicating with us, but we needed to outreach a little bit more. That imposes a little more challenge on the side of the embassy, which has a very small capacity, which has very small resources. The second thing, I think one of the biggest challenge, I would say, absence of any international cooperation or any regional cooperation, and I would say a big absence of the United Nations agencies, which I have faced in Jordan, and I'm sure that there are many other countries of origin. When we are sitting in another country, we face it during this time, at least with the COVID-19 situation. I would say that I have seen a big gap in there in terms of the presence of United Nations. A big absence, and all of this, I would say that there is a big absence of a mechanism that can address the vulnerabilities and also the difficulties of migrants around the world in times of crisis. There was one very small mechanism that came out from the GFMD quite some time back. It was launched, I think, in 2014. Yeah. But as far as I know, that it has ended in the scope of that MIKIC was till 2019. So we do not see any that kind of mechanism whereby we can address internationally the situation of migrant workers in a crisis time. There is nothing in the Global Compact on Migration on the emergency situation, and there is nothing much in the SDGs even. In that regard, I would like to refer, in a very few days ago, there was another webinar where I heard Ambassador Shahidul Haq, the former Foreign Secretary, talking about thinking of a new mechanism. So that is something we need to take a look at it. Now, you see, migration has always been a topic, an action, a situation where we always need two to tango. So the countries of origin or their embassies cannot do anything alone to serve the interest of the migrants around the world if we do not have the cooperation of the countries of the destination, and also if there is not a global platform or mechanism globally, which is an international cooperation in this regard. I think this situation now that has made it a bigger challenge for any of the countries of origin is that absence of that kind of international cooperation mechanism. We do not see any, not global, but not even regional. I would say that I tried a little bit to talk to about the other countries of origins from our region, which belong to...
Ambassador, just half a minute left. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take this half a minute, and just to mention that I tried to reach out to the members of the Colombo process who are in Jordan, but I didn't see much of that in that regard. So there is no regional understanding of cooperation, no global understanding of cooperation, and we need to work on it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have the next speaker, Mr. Thomas Matthew, eminent social worker who is based in Kuwait. Mr. Matthew.
Sir, please unmute your mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much. Of course, I have to say thanks to the organizers, Migrant Forum Asia, GRFDT, and CCRM for organizing this kind of virtual seminar on migration. So here, very eminent excellencies are there who are dealing daily with migrant issues, and also very CSO level workers. They are also very much engaged with migrants' safety and security of the migrants, and they are advocating for their welfare. So they are also here in this panel. So all are well versed in the issue of migration, and of course I have to thank once again for the organizers to invite me for this kind of seminar, wherein I am only a migrant worker, a grassroots level worker, I can say. So I am being invited, and it is I think it is an honor given to me. Let me come to the points which are raised. So Mr. William has very rightly pointed out certain things. I endorse fully with what he has already spoken about. Regarding the issues which we are, as migrants, we are facing, it is a number of enormous problems are there. And it is long ever since the problems are highlighted. These are discussed threadbare. And since 2016, we all know that the SDG, under the SDG goals, Global Compact was initiated. The discussions were initiated, and the Global Compact became a reality in 2018 December. So it was a Magna Carta, we can say, regarding the migrants. This is it's a Magna Carta for the migrants. And now slowly the nations started thinking about it, discussing about it, discourses were going on. And that is the time, regarding the implementation side, that is the time this COVID has happened. This is a sad situation, we all know. And the highly impacted people, the most vulnerable people, because the migrants are the most vulnerable. And among the most vulnerable are the migrant women as well as children. They are the most vulnerable in this COVID-19 also. And coming to that one, the implementation of these SDG goals is the one panacea what we can ask for all the global community to adhere to. This is the time we have to push for the implementation of the Global Compact in its full sense. There are certain lacunas, as Ambassador Nahida Shoban has already pointed out, that this is not addressing the crisis conditions. Yes, we know that it is not addressing the crisis conditions, but that we can definitely we can do. But the cooperation of the nations was lacking in this global crisis condition, and this was very badly impacted the migrants. We know that right from the Donald Trump to any other leaders, they haven't come together in one platform to contain this one and to defeat this COVID. They were all taking the politics, and the very badly this one has affected the migrants. So, as Mr. Daniel Saab already pointed out, we have to have a medium-term plan, short-term plan, and a long-term plan. Yes, we have all these plans together in Global Compact. So we have all the stakeholders in the migration cycle, or in the migration this thing, they have to work together to see that once the post-COVID period, the Global Compact is implemented throughout the world in the best way, the most effective way. That is the only solution as a migrant worker I am seeing, nothing else. We have a weapon, we have something in hand, we have something, a structure in hand already. So why can't we all together work together to see that all the nations in the world, especially the countries of origin as well as countries of destination, is implementing this. This is the effort all the CSOs as well as the diplomats and all the countries have to think about and act upon. This is the need of the hour, and this is the best opportunity, as I am seeing, to implement the GCM in its fullest sense and spirit. And coming to the missions or the embassies in this part of the world, I am in GCC countries. I'm talking about the GCC countries and the Middle East scenario. It is appallingly very poor performance by all these embassies. I am not talking about only the India. I am talking about most of the embassies where I checked. I have seen they are not at all proactive. This is a crisis condition. The safety and security of their people is the first and foremost thing for any embassy, for that matter. But they failed. They haven't come forward to do the service to safeguard the interest of the migrant workers. They haven't come forward. They were I can say they were sitting in their fortresses or the citadels where they are appointed. Very few embassies have come forward and tried to do something for their poor workers and the migrants. There are certain things when in the COVID situation. Yes, we know that there are many things have happened to the migrants, especially the salary theft, the salary robbery, or we can say the wage theft. This is a big issue, and the menial level or the lower level migrant workers, they were already in the problem of not getting the salary in time. And in addition to that, because of this COVID, this thing, they have taken as an advantage the employers as well as the authorities concerned. What happened? I can say in numerous cases of salary theft or the wage theft has happened.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Matthew. You have about half an hour.
No, so I have many things to say, sir. I mean, so the salary theft is
maybe
one.
You can wind up in 1 minute.
Yeah.
It's
a major issue, and also see, you can see in the amnesty here in Kuwait, it has happened. Still, all these countries of origin, they were pushing back their workers. Though you need not have to come, and here the countries, the Dindakat and the other things, they were pushing the workers. Actually, these workers, the migrants, were in between in the old man and the sea, and they were in this condition. Nobody wants them. Their country of origin they don't want, and the country of destination they don't want. And the country of destinations, wherever it is possible, they were looted in such a way that wage theft and other things. I am not going into, my time is so limited. I can talk about hours together regarding these kind of things. So the international community has to come forward. Of course, in the panel, very eminent people are there, Dr. Manish, Mr. Manish Gupta, he came to Kuwait, he knows about the issues here. I had a time to talk to him, and he knows, and he was joint secretary of the Gulf region. He knows about the issues. And why? Who is keeping back to act proactively for the migrants by the countries of origin? This is my question.
Okay,
So
Dr. Matthew, we will be coming back to you.
Yes, sir. I want time because I have many things to say.
No. I think question answer also is there.
Yes, sir.
And
Thank you.
Let's listen to the next speaker, and we'll come back to you. You have made some very interesting points about the actual performance of the missions, and it's all of interest to us.
It's a ground reality, sir. It's a ground reality.
Can I request,
I'm not blaming anybody.
Manish Gupta, Consul General of India, who was earlier in the Ministry of External Affairs and was keen handler of the issues pertaining to the migrant workers and the migrant workers. Manish Gupta.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It's very nice, sir, seeing you here in this forum. And it's indeed a great pleasure for me to connect with all of my former colleagues and the audience today who have joined here for this important meeting, sir. I remember during my former role, I have dealt with some of these issues. And after coming here to Sydney, as we were rightly, William said, and you were also talking about the role of the missions, which has tremendously expanded. In fact, as I see, it's an entirely new paradigm. And just in the interest of time, I would like to confine myself, how I see the challenges for COVID from here and how we try to deal with them as we move forward. This challenge, this crisis, sir, as you have rightly pointed out, is of an entirely different nature. In fact, this is a once in a lifetime crisis. In the living generation, in our generations, probably, we all are facing this for the first time. And I really wish this should be the last also. The challenge is of immense proportions and everybody is overstressed. When we talk about the countries of origin and we talk about the countries of destination, in terms of argument, it looks pretty simple. But the real challenge is the migrant workers remains the most vulnerable. Sitting here in Sydney, one category I would really like to add here, because there are a lot of students from the Indian subcontinent here. And in fact, they also come, if you ask me honestly, in the most vulnerable category. And as I see, the biggest challenge is, because we all have the countries of origin have a huge migrant diaspora in the countries of destination. So in a crisis like this, sending them back home in a short moment of time, short span of time, is not very easy. In fact, this entire operation is a scale of immense proportions. And two things from here I have really realized, which as a whole in the ministry also we have done well, is number one, the use of technology, creating centralized portals where you have the databases of the people readily available with us, whom we need to transport back to the country. And second thing is gearing the consular wings into an entirely different format, because they have to work on rotational basis. There are, as you pointed out, there are real, genuine COVID concerns, because a single case in any mission probably would take it out of the equation for next 48 to 72 hours. And here timing is really of the essence. And second challenge that I've seen is how you effectively communicate with your own people who are suffering. And there, I think the presence of the social media, really that matters the most. We have to be active on Twitter and Facebook on a 24/7 basis. I know some of our Thomas and others are sitting here, but we have to understand the entire thing in a proper perspective. The social media at least gives the mission the feedback, how the things are going and what we need to plan. And in this crisis time, the biggest challenge that we are facing is getting the approvals from the host countries also, where the people are living. Right, it's not easy. And second thing, one important role which we all have entered into, even the medical screening of our own people. Sending them back is really easier said than done. But getting them medically screened, putting them on the chartered flight or the special flights or the government flights, it takes tremendous amount of resources. So what the government of India has done, the Vande Bharat mission we have talked about, almost we have transported as of now when we speak close to 650,000 Indians back home in a short span of 60 days. So overall, it's a huge achievement, and we all are working towards it. As we move forward, we are adding more and more chartered flights, just ensuring point-to-point connectivity. And lastly, when it comes to students, they are the most in a very challenging field because the classes have shifted online. In countries like Australia, the students a lot depend also on the jobs, part-time jobs, which they are permitted to do here. The job scene has gone bust. So in fact, they are living here on the savings or the remittances that they are getting from their families. So for them, it's a real crisis situation. And even those who are well, they really need emotional support, counseling from time to time, really. And when I say it, I really mean it on a 24/7 basis. Otherwise, we'll see many untoward incidences because this is the generation, which is not very mentally strong to tackle the challenges because they are also seeing it for the first time. So they need to be given special attention. And lastly, one category of people whom I really would like to thank, the diaspora organizations. Earlier also, I have always been a firm believer, you are our force multipliers. You are our eyes and ears on the ground. The feedback we get from you really helps us to take the issues with the countries where we are in. And secondly, one thing we should also realize, when foreign missions like us, we are here, we have also identified some new ways working with the governments. Most of the times, I think my other colleagues are also there. We just keep the foreign offices informed. Meanwhile, we work directly with the stakeholders to ensure things go smoothly. If I have to work with the Ministry of Interior, if I have to work with the border forces, if I have to work with the Ministry of Health, I will approach them directly to get the things going on for the people on the ground. So these are some of the things that I personally see we need to do. And moving forward, as Ambassador Sobhan was saying, getting these people back again to these countries, it's also not going to be very, very easy because you need visa permissions, approvals, and they are not going to come till we find a medicine, a vaccine, or a standard operating procedure where we can allow these people to come back. So I stop here. Thank you for your patience, and I look forward, if we have any clarifications, something I would like to make an intervention later. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Manish Gupta. I think you raised some interesting points about social media and approvals from the host country, as well as the role of the diaspora organizations. We will, of course, further deliberate on them. Before we go to the next panel, I just wanted to mention that we have the seventh panelist whose name I inadvertently did not mention in the beginning, Ms. Josein Naun, who is going to speak to us from Lebanon, will be joining after Ambassador Ms. Samantha Jayasurya. So now can I request Ms. Sumita Krishna, advocate and solicitor from Malaysia. Forum is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers as well as to the moderator for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this topic. I've been working with many foreign missions in Malaysia since 2008, especially on migrant worker issues, especially on specifically on immigration, labor and criminal cases. So my relationship with the foreign missions are not new. Let me start by saying that the role of the missions became amplified during the COVID period because it was a period of uncertainty, especially when foreign nationals were forced to stay in a foreign country separated from their families back home. So it was inevitable for foreign nationals to turn to their missions for assistance. So I must point out that missions in Malaysia during the COVID time, did a lot of programs, and I would like to point out a few things that they did during the COVID lockdown in Malaysia. So I would like to put on record that many migrant sending country missions here in Malaysia provided the necessary assistance to their nationals. Example, when the Malaysian government didn't provide food aid to foreign nationals during the lockdown, there were missions who took on that responsibility and also worked with civil society organizations, mine included, to provide food aid. This was not something that the missions usually do, but good to say that they learned fast and they did well. Secondly, the missions also provided the necessary information on their websites and Facebook pages to their nationals on updates on travels, visa and passport renewals, translation of host government circulars. Thirdly, we also saw missions coordinating flights for their nationals to fly back home. Although I must say that some of the charges of the flights were exorbitant, a cost that many migrants could not afford. Fourthly, consular assistance were also provided in a systematic manner. Example, for those who needed to renew their passports after the lockdowns were lifted. As what William pointed out, the lack of monetary and human resources are a problem for many Asian missions. But this is something that the government must look into urgently, especially in countries that host large number of migrants. I would like to also share some instances that I felt the missions could have done better and could have been more proactive. Example, when foreign nationals in Malaysia were arrested during the lockdown period and they were exposed to the virus in detention, or when the migrants were detained in detention for a prolonged time because of inadequate flights, unclear procedures, or the unwillingness of missions to pay for the flights or to coordinate the flights. These are some of the crucial times that we expect, and the foreign nationals also expect, the migrants expect, the support of the mission to speak up for them. This didn't happen at all in the instances in Malaysia. Or instances where the migrants lost their jobs when the companies shut down, or when the host government revoked approvals for migrants to work in a migrant-dominant sector, which also left a lot of documented migrants unemployed, or when migrants are hounded by enforcement. Yeah, these are times when we need the missions to stand up, take a stand, dialogue with the host government. Even if you can't publicize the same, you must do this. For me, the mission's primary responsibility should be towards their nationals in the host country, then to the host government. Yeah, and in my concluding remarks, I must say that the missions must have dialogues and work together with all stakeholders, including civil society organizations, migrant communities, diaspora groups in the host country, on how we can move forward post-COVID, and also to ensure that the rights and protection of vulnerable populations like migrant workers, undocumented migrants, domestic workers, foreign spouses and their children are looked after. This is my concluding remarks. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Sumita. I think you have, again, made some very, very interesting points, and from a different point of view altogether. Missions have to be active on the social media, and civil society institutions do come forward if a proper dialogue is initiated. Very interesting points. We'll again come back to you. Next speaker, may I request Ms. Samantha Jayasuriya, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Thailand.
Thank you, Ambassador Mulay. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much to Mr. Shabri Nair for extending this invitation for us on behalf of the organizers. Particularly a great pleasure to see some of the colleagues whom we have had engagement on migration as well as human rights. And thanks to Migrant Forum Asia, CCRM, GRFDT for this very timely discussion, which is very close to our day-to-day work. And with regard to the Sri Lankan government's efforts led by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, we had at the very initial stages, deployed a COVID task force, as in many countries, and with the support of the security forces to manage the quarantine procedures, as well as the excellent medical teams working on treatment, preventive measures, and awareness raising, we have recorded a good progress, especially with very high recovery rates, something about 80%, and then also very low severity rates, that's about 0.55%. And having said that, as explained very eloquently by the previous speakers, as the disease started spreading across various parts of the world, the diplomatic missions were among the frontline forces. And it was similar for all the 67 missions and posts for Sri Lanka, particularly including the 16 missions which were having dedicated officers to look into the welfare of the migrant workers. And for us, we had like three main functions. One on gathering information and data to oversee Sri Lankans and identifying their requirements and timely reportage to Colombo. Also involving supporting or giving services to the needy migrants and arranging repatriations. So in terms of gathering data, we had in the foreign ministry a dedicated focal point and also a web portal called Contact Sri Lanka, which as of date has about over 86,000 entries. And in parallel, we all in missions started doing the data gathering, which was very important for the government to assess ground situations and identify priorities based on relative vulnerabilities. And as of date, Sri Lanka has about 1.5 million migrant workers, mainly most of them are in the GCC countries. And for us, we have been talking about, we have the importance of whole of government approach. For this COVID crisis, we had our foreign ministry and foreign minister and the minister of foreign employment held by one minister. So it enabled us to have in practice a very pragmatic approach for whole of government. And I think we in the midst of the COVID crisis need to continue this coordination with various stakeholders. And also when it comes to supporting the overseas Sri Lankans, I would say it is with a deep sense of respect and salutation to all colleagues serving in missions that they acted beyond a mere duty. And there was abundance in commitment, responsibility, and humane gestures. So they were involved in not only providing the day-to-day needs, dry rations as said by the previous speakers, but also on securing jobs and visa extensions, amnesties, even providing alternative shelters where possible. And in our case, we were also involved in making emergency medical evacuations across land borders. Naturally, as Mr. Manish said, most of our missions were working within limited capacities, limited resources. So this was an unprecedented crisis where the capacities had to be rise above to face the unprecedented challenge. And then on repatriation, as of now, we have in Sri Lanka done about 10,000, over 10,000 OSLs returned to Sri Lanka, but there are many more registered, particularly the migrant workers. But intermittently, the government had to make assessments on the numbers that can be allowed into the country, which was more important in terms of a small developing country where we didn't want to overwhelm the health resources so that this crisis doesn't go outbound. And then the overseas missions, when this intermittent stopping of repatriation was done, there was enormous amount of work that we had to do in engaging the people who have wanting to be repatriated. And at the same time, there were a very difficult prioritization to be done, particularly about the students and then stranded Sri Lankans who have come to the countries on short-term visas, and the migrant workers, those in irregular situation, as well as those who have lost jobs, and also people who had real humanitarian grounds to go back. And then it was our responsibility to make very objective and fact-based recommendations regularly to enable the government to make informed decisions so that priorities can be set. And also, we also were involved in coordinating with faraway destinations where we had Sri Lankans in small numbers. So most of the time we were using technology to coordinate remotely to look into their welfare. So it was all in all not only providing material support, but to give them moral support and confidence to engage with them as regularly as possible, that to give them a sense that the embassy is there to listen to them and to do whatever possible. And then since we were talking about the role of diplomatic missions during the crisis as well as beyond the crisis, I would like to touch base on some of my thoughts about this aspect. Beyond the crisis, how we need to be working as missions. I believe in the
Ambassador, sorry for intervention. You have about 1 minute.
Thank you. I'll be very, very quick on this. So there'll be more challenges in terms of job cutting as well as using more technology. So we need to help our migrants, especially the semi-skilled migrants as well as low-skilled migrants to enhance their skills. And also we have to gear up for more specific high-quality labor forces. It would be small in numbers, but more stronger and sustainable demand to be created. And then just briefly to touch upon about the regional mechanisms, which we would have expected more to be done through such regional forums. But for example, we in Colombo process wanted to work on migrant health, but we couldn't achieve that much on those subjects. And particularly, we wanted the Colombo process to be a coordinating point between capitals and Geneva, as well as those destination countries. So this is something which we have to look in the new normal, where we need to have more engagement with all the stakeholders through the regional processes. And as we begin the decade of action for SDGs, these all have to come into play. And I will stop there. But I do agree with that better engagement, better transparency, and to see new out-of-the-box innovative mechanisms to find new employments for our migrant workers would be pivotal role that will be vested on most of our missions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think you again made some very pertinent points not covered by the earlier speakers. And I'm glad that you highlighted the role of the missions. These are not very easy times for the missions to handle, because they have not seen something like this in the past. And in the normal circumstances, they face problems. This is a kind of a very, very crisis situation. And yes, some of them do very well. Some of them have difficulties too. I will now request our last panelist, Ms. Hussein Naun from Lebanon. And she could perhaps also highlight issues pertaining to women, women workers facing problems abroad, in addition to whatever she has to say, because this is not adequately covered, I feel, and she might be a good person, right person to comment on this. Thank you. Ms. Hussein Naun, please.
Yes. Hi, everyone, and thank you for organizing this panel discussion. I'm sorry I will not be able to turn on the video because we are having very bad connection in Lebanon. I want to start with highlighting on the issue of the process of repatriation in Lebanon, starting with the issue of the dollar in Lebanon, and that the Lebanese pound has lost 50% of its value comparing to US dollar. So technically, migrants now are not getting their wages, and most of them are not getting their wages, and or are getting it in a very low exchange rate. So the problem is we're going to start with many of them are calling on their embassies to help with the repatriation process. So last month we have a chaotic scene that occurred outside the Bangladesh embassy in Beirut, as we had around 400 Bangladeshis attempt to expedite the exit visa or to go back to their country. We have some other problems occurred, for example, such as in front of the Philippine embassy. Workers, undocumented workers, what the Philippine embassy did in Lebanon is that undocumented workers will have to pay fees of their illegal residency, but they will be contributing in the ticket fees in the US dollar. While other embassies and council in Lebanon, I'm gonna say, for example, the Ethiopian embassy, Kenya, we're talking about a small council in Lebanon. Maybe they lack of resources or financial capacities to support migrant workers in the repatriation process, to at least cover the penalty fees at the General Security, or even for the laissez-passer. They are even asking for the laissez-passer to be paid in US dollar using the exchange rate of the black market. We are facing this issue a lot, coming from the councils and embassies who are supposed to be protecting their nationals. And I would like also to highlight on the coordination process that is really challenging with all embassies and councils in Lebanon, because we don't have any focal point selected by the embassies and council on who to direct or to talk to in case of any emergency, protection issue, shelter, and even now with the repatriation process. For example, the Ethiopian Council was changed like 3 weeks ago, but until this date, we weren't able to even contact and to at least to know how to coordinate for the whole process. And another issue is that recently the embassies and councils have released a joint statement with the ILO. I'm not sure if it was with the ILO, but demanding to modify the kafala system, while us as civil society in Lebanon, the majority of civil society in Lebanon, we are demanding to abolish the kafala system because it is we call it the modern slavery. And they all know how migrants are treated under the kafala system in Lebanon. And finally, I would like also to highlight on the legal challenges that migrants are facing, that council and embassies have very small, they don't interfere, or they cannot interfere because maybe they lack of legal capacities, but we have several migrants who remain in detention centers for months and months just waiting for a ticket fees to be provided by the embassy or the council. And sometimes we go for fundraising campaigns for any issues, and even sometimes these ladies are pregnant, remaining in detention centers and demanding their councils and embassy to pay the fees, but we get no response. So I would like to highlight that, of course, some of the embassies and councils, they were cooperative, but not to respond to the need, especially now with the dollar crisis. We really need to take into consideration that they cannot pay US dollar to all the embassies and consulate, especially using the black market rate, which is hectic for them, and that most of them are now deployed and haven't received their wages. And we need more cooperation and coordination with the civil societies, because believe it or not, in Lebanon, we are the one acting and towards really protecting the migrants and making them go home safely. Hello?
Yes, audible.
Yes.
Is audible? Please carry on.
Yes. So, and also I would like to just take it to brief or to to say regarding the Ethiopian migrant workers who are now stranded in front of the council. Now the new council did a good initiative. He reopened the shelter again, and he's now accepting more migrants in the shelters. But the shelter conditions are not that good comparing to how the shelter conditions should be, because we know they lack of budget, they don't have the capacities, but of course they can always coordinate with the civil society. We also have the issue of the migrant workers. They don't know the number of the embassies and council that they can contact in case of any emergency, or they want to go back to their country. And we have started the repatriation process and the documentation of the files who wish to go back to their country since, I'm guessing, since April or May. But until the state, okay, some of them returned like 10% or 5%, let me say, and most of them were through the Philippine embassy only. But till this date, we are seeing that there's no serious negotiation done with the general security to remove all the penalty fees on migrant and nationals, or at least to contribute. So we need to see a common ground between the civil society, the diplomatic mission, and the government on how we can find a common solution to help these migrant workers go back to their country. And this is it from my side. I will be answering your questions. I'm glad to answer all of your questions later.
Thank you, Josein. I think you have at the dot 8 minute you have concluded. Thank you so much. You have raised really some very important points about coordination, developing a common ground, particularly the women who are pregnant and are stranded. A lot of this requires further contemplation and deliberation. So thank you so much, panelists. We will be moving to the next part, where we intend to have interaction with our participants and some very distinguished people. I will be initially calling some of the very distinguished people who are participating. But before that, let me also note the presence of some very expert people who are present here for their presence. Saiful Haq is here. Mehru Vesuwala is here, who was prominent member of Diaspora. Sumaya Islam is here. Nalini Nayak is also here. Mr. Madhavan Kalat is there. Professor Kamla Ganesh has also thought it fit to attend this particular webinar. Evelyn Tennant is here too. Lizzie Joseph, Arvind Francis from FICCI, which is, as you know, the apex body of industry and businesses in India, and Ellen Sana. These are very important participants, and I would like to thank them for participating and being present at this webinar. Just to begin with, may I request Shahidul Haq, former Foreign Secretary. This shows the level of interest that we have in this particular subject, and how many people and stakeholders really are interested in knowing what's happening, particularly vis-a-vis the role of missions. So is Mr. Shahidul Haq, Excellency, can I request you to say a few words, or if you have any thoughts quickly, about 2 minutes?
Excellency, I am afraid that he has a class at the university which he needs to, he has to leave.
Okay. All right. Then we have another expert from this time from JNU, Mr. Binod Kadria. Mr. Kadria, we are privileged to have you here. Please do favor us with a comment or two.
It was interesting to listen to the different, I would call them case studies of countries concerned, including Indian Mission in Sydney. I think most of the things that I have learned about these case studies are about the strategies that have been adopted for troubleshooting. I would call them troubleshooting, but at the same time, what I noticed is one of the speakers thought that the time was limited. I think he has a lot to share with us. And similarly, the ambassador from Bangladesh shared with us her desperate position in terms of absence of cooperation, of including the very important point that was flagged was that there is no provision even in the GCM to handle crisis. GCM has 23 objectives after a long drawn persuasion started by Kofi Annan in 2002. It took 16 years to bring all the member countries on board to discuss international migration, which has always been a hot potato because countries, particularly those who are in the diplomatic missions, they would know it better than anybody else that it is considered kind of an intrusion on the sovereignty of the countries concerned. And this is where what I call it equitable adversary analysis. I think this is the right moment, the challenge of COVID, to go beyond the troubleshooting, which is important, which has to be addressed in any case, to go beyond and use this as an opportunity to raise these issues in the multilateral forum. And I do not have great faith in multilateral forum because multilateral forum, I see them as inequitable because countries are global south and the global north are not equipped with similar kind of empowerment that they have. So when it comes to negotiations, I think there is not a level field is not there. Level playing field is not there. So I think this is the time that we learn from each other. We learn from each other in terms of different time horizons of what we have to address immediately, what missions have to take charge in terms of their own population as well as population of other countries, because there may not be very strong missions of very small countries in a particular destination country, and that's where perhaps either Indian mission or the Bangladesh mission may be better equipped to handle that. And India has, or other countries have set such examples, particularly at the time of evacuation, even Air India has lifted people from other nationalities. So this is the time, I think the diplomatic missions should step out of their own cocooned areas, shed some of their inhibitions in terms of that I think it was being shared here that I think our Consul General in Sydney himself said that they are directly contacting the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Health, and so on, without referring to their masters back in the Indian government, because time is short and you have to take the action immediately. And that's where I think it's a great deal of learning for ourselves, that the missions can draw lessons from this and come together. So this is an opportunity. This kind of forum is an opportunity for you where you are face to face with public, because otherwise there is a barrier. We can't hear you. We don't hear you.
Thank you.
I have said this, and just 15 seconds, I'll say that this, visa issue I have always addressed, that visas earlier we used to go to the missions. And that's where we had a face-to-face interaction with the people, diplomatic people of those countries. Now it has been outsourced to people of my kind. And so I just go and interact with them and shed more money than I used to be. And my alienation goes higher and higher. So these are some of the things that we need to reflect.
Okay. Thank you, Vinodji. We take your point. I think you mentioned.
Thank you very much.
You mentioned rightly that we have to go beyond, and that going beyond is going to be extremely difficult. I can assure you that.
Yes.
We have Mr. Farooq Ahmad, Secretary General of the Bangladesh Employers Federation. If Mr. Farooq Ahmad is there, would you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I'm available.
Okay, please go ahead and give me a quick comment. We are really going to run short of time, so I request you to be brief, please.
Sure. Thank you, Ambassador. First of all, it was a very rich discussion, and I'm very delighted to have been able to be present in this discussion. Because of the paucity of time, I'll straight away go to the point. My first appeal to particularly to the civil society organizations, to the private sector participants, with all my due respect to the government participants, we have to really harp on changing the very perception on philosophy of migration. Migration has mostly been focused from political and economic angle. We have to harp on so that the government realizes and changes perception. Instead of more emphasis on political and economic perspective, it should be viewed from the social perspective. So that is the first point that I would like to bring, so that the subsequent realignment is done from the social perspective instead of political and economic perspective. Number one. Number two, my request would be to all the stakeholders in the migration governance to have extensive use of technology so that we can have more transparency, more fair, more accurate governance in the whole migration process. And my number three appeal, that we should have more of collaboration and partnership among the various stakeholders in the migration process. So these are the fundamental issues that I wanted to bring in. And thank you so much for the very rich discussion. And I'm happy to see some of my very good friends and also colleagues, particularly our ambassador, our elder sister, Miss Nahida, after a long time. And also William. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you have again raised some very, very pertinent points of collaboration and civil society's role, which could be very useful and positive. I have Ambassador Manju Seth here, former Indian ambassador to Madagascar. I want to ask her, rather than giving her a free hand, I want to ask her to speak about women migrant workers and what has been her experience, and particularly during the COVID time, what extra measures the mission should be taking to ameliorate their conditions. Ambassador Manju Seth, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Slightly loudly if you can speak.
Good evening. It's really a pleasure to be here, and Ambassador Mule has of course moderated this whole thing so well, and it's been a pleasure being here and listening to all the eminent panelists. And I think, I was just, while I was listening to the panelists, I was thinking about how women's issues just fall through the cracks, so to speak, and people are not able to focus on women's issues at all. And maybe I was thinking, how can missions be made to focus on the women and ensure that the migrants, women migrants, and ensure their interests are maintained, especially, when they are, for instance, in the Gulf, many are documented when they go, especially the maids and domestic workers, they become undocumented. And then now with this COVID, in the times of COVID, they've been absolutely, ignored. Nobody is looking at what is happening to them and how they're affected. And some of them, they're not with their employers. They are living in small quarters, especially in the Gulf, in small areas living together. So they are very vulnerable and have also, there have been cases where they've been infected and there is no health care because they become undocumented. So nobody is even looking at them. I have a suggestion. I was thinking maybe, missions can enter into a kind of PPP mode, public-private partnership mode locally, as some of the others have also suggested, and work with local diaspora organizations and augment capacity. Because, for Delhi or for the headquarters or any other host, governments, to augment from there and send people and send money is difficult. But maybe locally, they could augment their capacities through roping in a PPP kind of mode, especially in times of crisis like this, and help migrant workers cope with this unprecedented situation. And similarly in future, in such crises. And I think also that if we can look at women's migration from the point of view of their, capacity, their skills really, rather than just let everybody go here, go from India also, increase their skills, don't let any woman migrant go to work abroad without her being made aware of her rights, and see that she has the skills before she is allowed to migrate. And so reskilling, making them aware of their rights so that they're not made fools of, they're denied their salaries and not given any good, their work conditions are terrible and they are left to their own devices. And the missions can't really go into homes and, especially in the Gulf, go into homes where domestic workers cases are concerned. Similarly, I've also been aware of some nurses, women nurses who have had some problems when they were working abroad. Maybe we should, look at those, at their problems as well, along with the huge at the overall crisis. And
Thank you, Ambassador. That was very useful. You have really highlighted some of the dimensions of issues being faced by women migrant workers. We also have a very distinguished personality who worked with the government in very responsible positions, including former Secretary in the External Affairs, in the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, Dr. Didar Singh, who is also an expert on migrant issues. Mr. Didar Singh, would you like to comment on what could be done, which has not been done so far by the missions? You have seen them from the headquarters and you have visited them a number of times. Are you there?
Sir, I don't think Mr. Didar Singh is there.
Didar Singh is not there. Then we get the next is Veena Swarup, who is from FICCI. She is present with us. May I request her?
Also left. Veena also had to leave.
Okay,
yes.
Let's thank her.
Mr. Lakshman Basnat from SAR took us here.
Yeah, okay. And is Mr. KV Swami here, or we should take him later?
Yes, sir, I'm there. I'm here.
Okay, so after our, speaker, Mr. Lakshman Basnat, can I request you? So please, Mr. Lakshman, we would be very happy to hear your brief comments. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mole. Thank you. It's very nice to see you again. I have met you during Colombo process meeting in Kathmandu. I'm from Kathmandu and I work for South Asian Regional Trade Union Council. And as soon as COVID-19 started, Prime Minister of India has said that let the SARC do something about the COVID. And they put some money into this process also.
Right, $10 million.
Yeah, but after that, nothing has happened with the SARC. And regarding the GCM, I would like to say, if you go through all 23 objectives, in each of objective, this kind of crisis is very particularly described. Like you cannot distinguish between the national and migrant in process of health and social securities and other things. But the situation in GCC countries and Malaysia is out of control. There is no one to give them assurance that we are there to help you. I'm not talking about one government or one embassy. Most of the workers feel that they are helpless and trapped in the country of. I can assure you, on July the 9th, the New York Times wrote a very big article about migrant workers in in Lebanon, and mostly depicting about the South Asian migrant situation, and especially the women worker from Ethiopia. But it depicts about the people, what they are going through in all of the countries, in GCC countries and Malaysia. So I think it's never too late, but the cooperation is the most important thing. We have to cooperate with the countries of, if countries of Colombo process or countries of SARC can come together and discuss with the countries of GCC countries to resolve the problems in GCC country and Malaysia, we would be much better off. I'm not going to say that what embassies or the missions have been doing or not doing, but the workers in the country of destination, they are desperate, and some of the government are not ready to bring them back, because they think that it is very difficult for them to handle it. It is the right of the migrant workers to come. And I know the missions are full of migrant workers there. And unfortunately, the diaspora organizations, I have nothing to blame them, but they are much more important than the migrant workers. So I think the first priority should go to the migrant workers to bring them back. And some of the states of India has doing very well in destination countries, like government of Kerala is sending some money there, or organizations like this individually are doing their food support, telephone, putting money into telephone. There are a lot of things. But if all the countries of the South Asian region or Colombo process, as you know, Mr. Muley, you were here in Kathmandu, come together, this problem will much easily, through the this GCM, we can resolve it. And this is a very extraordinary situation. So we have to take an extraordinary step to resolve our people. We are the largest migrant sending block in the world to GCC countries.
Right. Thank you.
I think
thank
my
you,
time
Lakshman.
is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate your points. Particularly the emphasis on collaboration and cooperation, and some strong dialogue under Abu Dhabi and Colombo process. Thank you so much. I'll invite Mr. K.V. Swami, Overseas Manpower Corporation of Andhra Pradesh, again, who is directly involved into issues pertaining to migrant labor, migrant workers. Thank you. Dr. Swami.
Sir, thank you very much. Sir, the issues and challenges we are facing right now are because of delays in process, like offices have been closed in Kuwait and Muscat. So the candidates could not approach them for quicker redressal or if any issue is there. And second issue we have is like reaching them, reaching the candidate. Since in this pandemic time, the employer is not allowing us to speak to the candidate with the fear that the candidate may leave him or unwanted trouble may come to his home. But in spite of that, we have been putting our best efforts through the non-resident Telugus located there. We are taking their help and reaching them. Embassy has been so busy and all the rescue homes conducted by the embassy are very full. So they are expressing their helplessness also. So the first thing is we need to ensure that they are safe wherever they are. Second thing is like bringing them back here. And they are insisting like some COVID test there again, and before travel and after travel and tickets. Of course, a lot of issues are there. But we are putting efforts, sir. That is my submission. And second thing is, sir, having learned from this, what I have recommended to the government of India also in future, the pre-departure orientation training should be made mandatory for the women workers. It should be minimum 3 days to 7 days, because this is the new learning we have, that is hygiene, health, precautions, and some language, where to reach out. So these are the added things. So any woman worker leaving from India, she should be aware of all these things, so that she can be taking care of herself, and she can extend care to the children or the old man or the family owner there. So this is what I have to submit.
Thank you, Dr. Swami. I think being a man on the ground, your points are absolutely valid. People must get help wherever they are. And of course, that is also a challenge that the governments and the missions particularly face. I would request Mr. Rafiq Rauther, Center for India Migrant Studies. Mr. Rafiq, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for this chance, because I already wrote some points in chat box, and I don't want to blame the missions at this time, because we know that, as Excellency said, this is new to them, everyone. But the Saudi mission, because SART, we know the experience of SART, and we came through a situation like this before. So at least the mission could have, the Saudi mission, I am talking about, especially about Saudi mission, could have do something more. But the total days we covered so far, it is showing that the mission in Saudi was not active like the other missions, like UAE. It was very active, and Oman was also good, and Qatar was very tremendous job they did. So at least Saudi missions could have do, because my concern is this is new to everyone. We cover that situation, but we have to document, we have to foresee what will happen in tomorrow. Sir, my main concern is, I checked all the repatriation links of India, and I found that there is no mention, there is no concern about the questions regarding the workers issue. We were asking about why this worker is going back, what is the priority, which priority list he should post there. But there is no mention about asking about his wages, why he lost job, what is his future. Nothing is there, because Kerala, we received around 80,000 workers 2 days before, 80,000 workers who lost job. And we have big concerns on their future, their reintegration. We don't have enough fund. We know that our state is working like a country itself. Lots of things we done in between, and several missions, even the Qatar embassy did very supportive for Kerala's initiative. But what happened to these workers? My concern is for the future of the workers. They are never documented anywhere in the mission, anywhere in the history, anywhere in the records of the government of India. So I am just registering my issue here. I think government of India will do. Government of India will address this issue in future, like to register their grievances, register their issues, and do a web portal or something to address their issues, a transitional justice mechanism to take up this issue to the destination country. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I think, again, a very relevant point that the documentation and data is not mentioned. Maybe, Manish, later on, you would like to tell about the skill mapping, briefly, that is being done for all the returnees by Government of India in the case of all the repatriations that are happening right now. I will request a last, comment from Meru Vesuwala, who has been a former diaspora member from Bahrain. Are you there, Meruji? In case...
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, go ahead. Floor
all
is
right,
yours.
good evening, and thank you everyone for this very informative panel and discussion. I'd just like to raise a few points. I know that the role of the mission is vital and very, very important, especially during these days. And I do feel, there are issues and normally workers look towards the embassy for redressal of their issues. So it is very important for the embassy to take the help of the diaspora and organizations, acknowledge their contribution, and look at the workers in a little more humane sense. There should not be that these people are a burden on us. So there are, for example, in Bahrain, I was part of the Indian Mission's community outreach program called the Indian Community Relief Fund. It works under the mission. The ambassador, His Excellency, the ambassador is the patron. And I think that you need to have these very strong partnerships with the community and the diaspora, because these days are unprecedented. And it has been pointed out by many of the panelists that the missions are perhaps short-staffed and lacking in all the resources. Though you do have the Indian Community Worker Fund, I don't know how it is being utilized, whether really the fund is being fully utilized towards meeting the day-to-day and daily needs of the workers. I'd especially like to point out about the women and the domestic workers particularly. I think they are really in a far more vulnerable and pathetic situation, because women, when they leave their employers in the Gulf, they become even more vulnerable. They cannot go back to their employer. They have to have a safe house where they can be kept, looked after, and helped in the repatriation process. Many of the missions do have safe house programs, but many don't, and depend upon either the host government or they depend on civil society organizations in the destination country for housing these women. Now, I know in Bahrain, the Indian mission would be using the NGO of the Migrant Workers Protection Society for housing the women who came to the embassy looking for help towards repatriation or the labor issue redressals. But the safe house of the Migrant Workers Protection Society closed down last year. And I don't think there is another safe house other than the government run.
No, sir.
So I think every embassy... Sorry? I don't know whether somebody was trying to talk back to me, but I think it is very important that for women, every mission should have their own safe house, like there is for in the Philippines, even the Indonesian, Nepali government, they all have their own safe house programs, because you need to keep the women safe, and then you need to work on their repatriation. You cannot send them back to employers again. So I think this point needs to be really addressed very, very seriously, because women definitely are the most vulnerable. And under these pandemic conditions, I think they are even more, their situation has become even more precarious. I would like to say that having worked with the Indian mission, particularly in the Kingdom of Bahrain, personally, I have to acknowledge the enormous support and cooperation that we did get from the staff. There are challenges for them. I think it is, there are always two sides to a coin. And we need to acknowledge also that the labor staff is largely headed by a labor attaché and under the First Secretary Labor. And the number of staffing is perhaps not enough for the number of Indian diaspora that is there in the GCC countries.
Yeah.
So I do think that addressing these challenges and maybe going forward, the governments, not only India, but all the other sending country governments need to look at how can we strengthen the labor section of the missions particularly.
Right, right. Thank you. I think those were very valid observations and wonderful participation by our expert, participants that have been present with us. I will now quickly take one or two questions and I'll request the panel experts to comment on them very briefly because we are running short of time. So Manish, would you like to say something quickly about the skill data mapping of the returnees? Because that's a subject which is really, because ultimately when you come back, you are having no job, no security, you are suddenly landing, and in these difficult situations, you are adding to the unemployment problems that are already there.
Sir, I will very briefly touch upon the points of the skill mapping of the returnee migrants. In fact, as many of the speakers earlier and some of the people who have asked questions have pointed out, the importance of tapping the skills, harnessing them appropriately of the returnee migrants. As we always believe, it's important for us as a country to draw the right lessons from any crisis. And as I earlier obliquely referred to the use of technology, a centralized repatriation portal that the government of India set up has worked us tremendously well. It's not only about the demand and supply management with regard to the repatriation operations, but it has also provided us an opportunity to tap the skills of the returnee migrants. Having a database of the returnee migrants' skills is extremely important for us to use them for the development of India, and even perhaps, when there is a future need for migration and these people want to migrate to their own countries of destination, probably this would be much more helpful for the foreign employers also. I distinctly recall earlier also through the India Center for Migration, we started the program for the PDO programs also, and we were in the process of developing an app also where we can tap the skills of these migrants, properly register them, and these databases can be seamlessly linked with the destination countries. We started this program with the Saudi and the UAE, where our electronic systems were to be aligned, the e-migrant system with the Saudis, e-Tawfiq, and the program for the UAE also. Perhaps we are moving in the right direction. Its only thing is how fast we can implement it and put it on a realistic footing. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you, Manish. I have a question, which is I would like Dr. Thomas Matthew to respond to. This is from Lizzie Joseph, who wants to know, is it possible to create a strong network of the stakeholders, and how can we do that?
Yes, sir. Yes, Sister Lizzie what asked was correct. It is the need of the hour, because so many issues, so many problems are there. So different stakeholders in the migration process should be networked together and to find out a way. They have to sit together, find out a way how to deal with these things. It should be there. When saying all these things, we have to see. I talked about the wage theft and salary theft happening right now. How this can be? These workers, they are all contract workers. They are on short-term basis. So mostly they are on coming on a visit visa and all 3 months, 5 months, or 1 year job and going back. These kind of workers are there. So those kind of workers, their salaries are not given in this condition. So we have to find a mechanism to compensate properly to these people. I am experienced about the UN compensation. I was in the Iraqi invasion time here in Kuwait, and I was one. We lost everything. I was a refugee, and I came back, and there was some compensation mechanism was there. Like that, Mr. Rafiq a while ago, he was telling about the transitional justice mechanism. So we have to think in terms of that. We have to see that the wage theft is not happening. All the contract workers, the migrant workers, they should be get their rightful wages and salaries and remunerations, whatever is entitled to them, they should get it. And they have, when they are repatriated, they must not be forcefully repatriated. Nowadays, everything is happening forcefully. It is not repatriation; it is deportation. Most of it is happening. So that should be stopped. We have to see that the post-COVID scenario, wherein this kind of forced repatriation, deportation, and that should not happen. We have to see. We have to find a mechanism. Maybe somebody will say it is not possible. Maybe thinking, but it should happen. We have to work together. A network has to come together to see that this is happening on the ground. Why these regional bodies like Colombo Process and Abu Dhabi Dialogue? The dialogue should not, if the dialogue is continuing, let it continue. But something on the ground, action should be there.
So we have these two, I think, interesting.
One more thing, sir. I mean, regarding the compensation side, there are so many workers died because of the COVID here. In this kind of this thing, their family, their earning member is lost all of a sudden. And these countries of destination have the complete responsibility to see that they are sufficiently compensated. If a traffic accident or insurance this thing is happening, there is a compensation mechanism. So a compensation mechanism should be there, a sufficient this thing to be support their families should be done, and also the country of origin, they have their responsibility. They cannot shy away from that. Even I am talking about if India government have to set apart a fund and give 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs, whatever. They have to give to the families of these deceased because of the COVID conditions. So these are the things. There are many other issues.
Very well said.
Short of time, I am stopping here. But the transitional justice is one point where we have to see that the worker is getting their rights. That's all, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Next question is to Ambassador Nashida Soban. This is about governments of South Asia getting together to work in this particular crisis. What are your thoughts? Prime Minister Modi did interact with all the SAARC countries to begin with, and we have set aside some funds also. But there is this question from one of the participants: can government of South Asia come together?
Thank you, Excellency Ambassador Muley. I would say that from Bangladesh side, and also personally, I think that South Asian regional countries need to be together on this. It is a journey that we need to do together, and it is possible. As you have rightly mentioned, that Prime Minister Modi of India did have a talk with the other member countries, and also SAARC member countries, and there has been a fund activated. I do not know, I do not have the current situation of the fund, how much is collected there, and whether any particular mechanism has been set up for the use of the fund. That needs to be seen. What is the mechanism? What is the protocol for the use of that fund, and how that can be used? But it is certainly a time where we need to work together, not only in the headquarters, but also in the countries of destinations where we have missions from these South Asian countries in the same city where we have missions. So I would very much say that we can work together, and we should. If I have some comments for some of the other comments made. So can I do it now or later?
Quickly, yes, quickly go over.
Okay, very good. I see there is some generalized comment about all the missions not doing anything. I would differ on that. And if you listen to Sumita very correctly, I think her speech was evident that yes, there are missions that are working and stepped up out of there. I mean, there are a lot of missions from all the countries of South Asian region that have punched over their weight. For my mission, I worked with only 2 people, and I've seen a lot of other missions doing that, the same thing. Yes, there are some missions that have not been able to do things the way they were expected to do because they were overwhelmed, but there are missions that have worked a lot. Here, another thing I would like to say that a lot depends on the countries of destination as well, how they are also cooperating with the missions. But at the end, if we put too much emphasis on the work and the responsibility of the mission, we are missing out one thing. We are putting all the emphasis on the responsibilities of countries of origin. But as I said at the very beginning, that it needs to go. So we also have to see and talk about and emphasize on the role and the responsibility of countries of destination, not only on the countries of origin. And I think Farooq Ahmed from Bangladesh mentioned one thing about social issues. I'm very glad that you have mentioned it, because if you remember, during the chairmanship of GFMD of Bangladesh, when Bangladesh was chairing GFMD, we included 3 sub-themes. One was economy, one was governance, and very importantly, we also included the social issues and another sub-theme. Now, lastly to say, you know that even the countries individually are doing a lot for the for the compensation of the workers. I can say from Bangladesh, our Honorable Prime Minister has announced a specific, very specific fund for the expatriate Bangladesh, and we have already started handing over the funds for those who are going back, but also for those who have died during COVID, and giving funds for their as compensation for their family members. So
Right.
countries are in it, but we have our challenges as well, and we commit to work together to fix those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think those were very interesting responses. I have two more questions. We'll quickly take them. And one is from Mr. Om Prakash Manji. He's asking how the structure of health schemes in the countries, destination countries, has changed from pre-COVID times. Can someone, because I don't know whom to address this question exactly, can anyone volunteer to respond to this, please?
Maybe I can try.
Yeah, please go, Smita, Krishna.
Well, pre-COVID, I must say, example, in Malaysia as a destination country, migrants, undocumented migrants did not have access to medical. They had access to private medical if they could afford it, but not to government medical. And documented workers were dependent on their employers for access to medical, because they had to have insurance, and they had to have the necessary paperwork from the employers to seek medical to government medical. But during the COVID, this changed because, of course, to contain the spread of the virus, the medical system was open to everyone, regardless of their undocumented status. So undocumented workers as well as documented workers, everyone had access, free treatment as well as free screening in medical facilities. So that was one of the good things that was done in Malaysia. Of course, later the government retracted that and began detaining persons who were under a particular area, a restricted area. So that was not a positive thing. But then prior to that, it was a good move to allow all persons access to medical. So it shows that it can be done. It shows that the government can provide medical for everyone if it wanted to. So this is something that we should welcome, and I think the host country as well as the country of origin should work towards providing medical for all. The remittances that the countries of origin obtain, and the levies that the countries of destination obtain from migrant workers, that kind of benefit should be used to provide medical, to provide benefits to the migrants themselves, because the migrants are the ones who are bringing out this money. So these are some of the funds that could be used for the benefits of the migrant. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask the last question. Maybe Ambassador Jayasuriya or MS Josein Naun could respond to this. This is about what are the learning lessons for the sending states in the COVID-19 times. Is Ambassador Jayasuriya, would you like to respond, ma'am?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very pertinent question for us to take home following this unprecedented scenario. As said very well, we were prepared to respond to normal time consular issues, but many missions were overwhelmed. But the positive side of this whole issue is that when the missions were collaborating with the help of all the stakeholders on the ground and on the destination countries, that there is some level of confidence being built, and which we should be using this aspect to respond to any future crises that are to become. And for example, in Sri Lanka, we had the Foreign Employment Bureau Fund, which was dedicated only for those registered migrant workers. But with the COVID situation and then with the database developed, we realized that there were more undocumented irregular migrants. And then with the cabinet decision, this fund was extended to those undocumented or those who were irregular status. So these were some of the better coordination and also identifying the issues on the ground. And then one other critical issue that has been discussed in this panel was about the migrant health. And we, within some of our regional forums, particularly in Colombo process, had tried to address this issue, but which didn't garner that much support and attention. So this particular unprecedented health crisis has given us an eye-opener why we should invest more on migrant health. And particularly the other aspect, in time to come after post-COVID, there will be more economic and related trade commerce issues which will be done on digital platforms. So we should, as countries, especially sending countries, to be ready to grapple with this new normal and to prepare our workforce to respond in such a manner. One last point about the female migrant workers, which is very sensitive. And we all, as developing countries, we have our migrant women mostly migrating out of desperation for economic needs. But then we also have to better equip them through better training and also pre-departure orientation, so that they will be not only skilled in particular niche areas, caretakers or caregivers, so that they will be able to get more defined wages and defined rights, and the missions will be able to protect their rights better. So these were, I think, some of the lessons. And also in the multilateral system, we talked about the GCM. So now it is time for us to candidly look inward to see what has worked, what has not worked, and what would have worked better for us if we had certain policies and guidelines and more forward-looking collaboration. So this is a time, I think, a challenge that as well as an opportunity for us to better reformulate, transform our own responses. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think you have summed it well. Time to see what has worked and what has not worked. I think that actually the tagline, that should be the tagline of the entire webinar that we have had today. We have, would you like to add anything, Ms. Josein Naun, please? In case you have, then we'll listen to you, and otherwise we'll move to the closing session quickly. I think perhaps Madam is not around. We shall proceed. Let me, in the closing part 3, I would request the panelists to say in a minute's time your own observations, or what are the takeaways that you think came from this particular webinar, or anything else that you not said. A minute each, considering that we have crossed the time limit set for ourselves. Please, can I start from the reverse order? Madam Samantha Jayasurya, in case you wish to add anything to what you have said. If you don't have, we can move also. There's no issue. Your mic is off, ma'am. Can you put on your microphone? Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I think I tried to sum up, thinking that it was my final comment. But I guess I want to say that we take this challenge as an opportunity, and to see what went wrong or what has worked, and then build on as collectively. And at the same time, there will be a lot of best practices around us. So it is a time bilaterally as well as multilaterally to garner these and help ourselves to look for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Ms. Smita Krishna, in case you wish to say anything in conclusion that we missed so far.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight one pertinent issue that has been a problem in Malaysia and for migrants here is that migrants who wish to return back to their home countries are required to go through a COVID test, a mandatory COVID test, and quite a number of the sending countries are imposing the test. Not all, just some. But the problem here is the cost of that COVID test is extremely expensive. It's almost about 80 to 90 USD. And for a migrant worker, it's a very large sum of money to pay, especially since they have not been working for 3 months prior to their departure, or even for tourists who have been stranded here, and just about for everyone who has not been able to go back. So imposing that kind of requirement, I think it may be a little bit counterproductive. So and especially when we don't have enough test kits in the country to provide for everyone. So I think the country of the sending country needs to relook at this policy to ensure that you need to take back your migrants who want to go back, but not impose this kind of restriction. I think it's not really working out that well for migrants here who want to return. Thank you.
Right. Very valid point. Manish Gupta.
So very quickly, I will just touch upon 4 points which I feel. The first point, I think the important lesson is we need to draw the right lessons for the governance of migration. We need to work together with the destination countries and also recognize this is always going to be a slow moving process. We will have incremental outcomes, but nonetheless, we must continue to insist on it. Second point, in our respective frameworks, we need to prioritize the most vulnerable. It's very easy to said and done, but it really requires a strong political will and a lot of work on the part of the foreign offices also. In the Indian case, the Indian Community Welfare Fund has worked exceedingly well. But then I must really thank, the political will that was there in our system to put it off the mark the way we wanted it to be. The third point, we need to focus on using the technology and the social media. Many a times, those who are in the bureaucracy, they think technology is a very, very different and very challenging animal. It's not like that. Each one of us in the missions, consulates, within the ministry, we can use it for our own benefit. It will be helpful in building up the databases and registering the skilling set of migrants, which can be put to better use. And lastly, we must continue to reform and improve our systems. Feedback is exceedingly important. All the community organizations, the workers who are being represented here, please continue to share your feedback with us. And the last request, please slightly be patient. All the missions, consulates, wherever in which part of the world, the governments, they take your feedback seriously and they work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think very important points, including we have to be patient. Yes. Can I request Thomas Matthew to conclude, his own observations? And is there anything left? A minute, please, sir. Your microphone is not on. Yes.
Yes, sir. I'll put everything in 1 or 2 points. One is that in this crisis conditions, this is a global crisis condition. There was a MIKI initiative, Migrants in Countries in Crisis. There is an initiative under the UN, and there is a report also. But the countries failed, or the UN failed to implement these kind of things prior to that one. So at least now on, we have to see that these kind of initiative and the reports, because I attended some of these conferences, and there is a report is there. So we have to see that this MIKI initiative is taken care of, and it is put into practice by all the missions throughout the world. Then this kind of crisis conditions can be overcome. This is one point. The other thing is that there is a ICW fund. There is an Indian Community Welfare Fund is there. There is a huge fund is there. there is a political will is lacking. I am talking about India. There is a political, this is the money which we have given to the distressed people to take care of them. Why the government of India is not giving directives to the embassies to make use of this one? The distressed people are there. In this condition, why it is not given? This is one point I wanted to ask to the Indian authorities. This is one thing. And also, the embassies are shying to work with the civil society organizations. More than the embassies, many of these civil society organizations have worked, and they have done a lot of work. And they're the small and large scale work they were doing. Even the repatriation, even the giving food and other all kind of facilities. These civil society organizations were in the forefront, but they are not at all recognized, or a coordinated work was missing, and that is why an effective way of doing fighting the crisis we failed. If we failed, we can say. That's all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think from my personal experience, I can say that the ICWF funds are mostly at the discretion of ambassador with the certain limits. But anyway, this is a point of technical information which can be sought from Minister of External Affairs.
One thing I can tell, let me add, we have taken a court order to say that this fund is to be utilized. We have taken. Similar thing has happened with the amnesty in Kuwait. I have written to the Prime Minister, the ambassador, the ministers, everything. Nothing happened. But I was forced to go to the Supreme Court to get a directive, and after that only the government started acting, and the repatriation process was done for the amnesty people here in Kuwait. So this is it's a political will is lacking.
Okay, I do appreciate your point that sometimes the policy decisions in the head in a home foreign ministry, it does take time, and the embassies are put sometimes at some awkward position. But anyway. Thank you for making that point. I will request, before I request the last panelist to speak, Ms. Elena Sana, who is from, to give us perspective from the Philippine point of view about this thing. And then in the end, I will request our ambassador, Nashida Sobam, to have so-called the last word. Is Ms. Elena Sana is around? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I think just to iterate the point that for countries like the Philippines, we do not have enough number of embassies to cover all our people. Like we are in 238 countries and we only have like 18 embassies, consulates, and much less number of labor offices. So I think the point is, and this is mentioned several times already during the discussion, we need to really strengthen cooperation and collaboration with our counterpart missions from other countries of origin. At the same time, and making exchanges of information and best practices. So, for example, how do you combat trafficking, and how do you get rid of unscrupulous recruiters and employers even? You share the information. We're all working, our migrant workers are working in one destination, and the recruiters in those destination countries will be going to all our countries. So you have the information, and I think it would be very good. It will serve the interest of all our migrant workers. We will be sharing this information that we have as per our experiences. Of course, it's been mentioned already many times, especially by Thomas, the need to also give recognition to members of the community, the migrant community, the diaspora community, that always rise up, especially in public emergencies, public health emergencies such as this pandemic. And I think it's only proper that we accord them not only the recognition, but also the respect that you are indeed our partners, not only in times of need, but also that, make it real and providing them slots or voices in policy making, in consultations, that they should be given the voice, to be consulted directly. I think it's quite important to do that, not only the countries of origin, but especially also in the countries of destination, and the missions can facilitate those spaces for the migrants and for the organizations of migrants. Definitely, I think at the end of the day, especially in pandemics such as this one, we need to look after not only of our own migrant workers, but of all the migrant workers, negotiating with the countries of destination. If we need to get visas, so our workers will have to be repatriated and those things, we need the missions to do that. Especially in the Gulf, where migrant organizations have very limited access, direct access to the host governments. We need the missions to facilitate those linkages so that our workers will be less burdened, especially in these times. I think that's all I wanted to say, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Sorry for very little time we could give you, but we are about to conclude now. So last word, Ambassador Nashida Soban, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mule. I would like to focus on three things which I previously mentioned, except for one. One is about the cooperation, the partnership at the regional level as well as the global level. In the regional level, it has to be within the countries of origin, but also engaging with the countries of destination. So at the regional level, partnership and cooperation, and also international level partnership and cooperation. And the role of UN has to be emphasized, because that's where we always count on. I still believe in multilateralism because I have spent most of my career time in multilateralism, so I still believe in it, but it has to be reinvigorated. And one thing is missing from UN is their engagement on migration and migrants issues. Here, I would say at the global level, yes, political will is one thing that needs to be emphasized, and we need to look into it. Secondly, one thing I think we have discussed about a lot of things, but one thing is missing from our discussion, which I would like to add. It is the responsibility of the migrants themselves. Their responsibility in engaging with the embassy and in engaging with the missions work, and also cooperating with the mission, and also about their status in every countries of destination. And lastly, which I have also mentioned about, like at the very beginning, I talked about the scope of MIKIC. We need to take a look into it. If it doesn't work, then we need to probably think about similar kind of mechanism whereby we can address the situation of migrants, particularly destitute and vulnerable migrants in the times of crisis. And there I would say that we need to really come up with some kind of mechanism in whatever form it is, in a very short period of time. We cannot have something like 2 years of discussion or negotiation to come up with that kind of mechanism. And it has to be like we cannot wait for another crisis to come and then we have this kind of mechanism. It is of urgency that we talk about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think you really summed up well. Now it's thank you, the panelists, and now I come to the closing. Since the time is very, very short, I'll just, rather than going in details, I'll wrap up by mentioning the points that have emerged. We can call them takeaway or concluding points. We need to have short-term, medium-term, and long-term thinking on this and plan. That's number one. Number two would be, there has to be a better coordination among various stakeholders. Somebody mentioned PPP mode, civil society organizations, and a prominent role to them. Just now you mentioned about the responsibilities of the migrant workers themselves. They should be, of course, at the center of this debate and this discourse. Next one is the regional, multilateral, and international organizations. They have to be much, much more proactive in this, and including UN. You said UN, but I see in the 17 SDGs, there is no specific provision about labor or workers, if I remember them correctly. Next is the information infrastructure. We call it in various ways, but information gaps have to be filled in at various places, whether it is data about those who want to return, whether it is skill mapping that has to take place, all kinds of, because this data will be ultimately very useful to every stakeholder. Next one, these are not necessarily in order of priority. Next one is women, vulnerability about, particularly and a focus and a separate approach to deal with the problems that the women workers face abroad. Next is, SOPs, best practices, political will. I would, I'll put them in one set, because without political will, nothing can move. There has to be very, fast and very strong decisions at the headquarters. And for that, political will has to be very much there. Communication and coordination is other issue that needs to be addressed very, very seriously. We have to focus on undocumented workers, because again, this is a different set of workers who need special attention. Highlighting the role of host governments at destination countries, because I think what have they done, what they can do, and how can it be a stronger partnership at local level bilaterally between the missions and the host governments. I think that's an important point that we need to really look at. Someone mentioned a very important point about the coordination among the missions. There has to be more interaction and exchange of views, among various missions at the destination countries, because that will help us in getting to know what is happening in terms of handling of these workers. Strong network of stakeholders, we discussed that. Empowering the missions in terms of human resources, in terms of manpower, in terms of equipments related, which will help them in better communication, faster communications. So in terms of resources to be made available to the missions, empowering. Thomas Matthew mentioned about the role of the welfare funds and how they are utilized. And last but not the least is return of workers. There has to be a very different set of approaches or strategies or measurements that handles the returning, because I don't see, because in India the responsibility is with the states, and the states are not often proactive in taking up these issues. Lastly, which is not directly related to this thing, but again a very important, and somebody did touch upon it, is the human policies or human approach of the missions. We have to be sensitive to the vulnerabilities. We have to be compassionate as missions. Then only we'll be able to extend the necessary assistance and help. I really rest my case there. I would like to thank the experts. I'd also like to thank the participants, panelists, for a wonderful and very vibrant discussion, if I may describe it in those adjectives. Thank you very much. I would now request Ms. Raula Amati from the Cross Regional Center for Refugees and Migrants to give her concluding remarks and close with vote of thanks to everybody present here. I would like to thank personally Mr. William Goy, Dr. Sadanand Sahu, Ms. Raula Hamati, and Mr. Shabri Nair of Ireland. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Moulay. It's been a very rich discussion today on missions and the role of missions. In a very difficult migration journey, oftentimes missions are the home away from home. Unfortunately, sometimes we still see many migrant workers being turned away at the doors of missions. This webinar has been really a very rich discussion on going further, a step further, and really realizing what missions could be, the potentials of missions, of being more inclusive and more responsive of migrant needs, more responsive of documented workers, more responsive of undocumented workers, women migrant workers, all of the employment problems that we talked about today. We hope that this conversation does not end here today. We hope that this is something that we will continue to take forward. And we hope that this will continue with all of the people that were here today. On behalf of the Cross-Region Center for Refugees and Migrants, Migrant Forum in Asia, and the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, we would like to thank our 6 panelists who did an amazing job today. We would like to thank Ambassador Samantha Jayasuriya, Ambassador Nahida Subhan, Consul General Manish Gupta, Thomas Matthew, Sumita Krishna, and Josiane Noon for their wonderful contributions today. And also a big, big thank you for you, Ambassador Moulay, for leading us in this discussion and leading us in the preparations as well. And we hope that you will continue to lead us going forward in the follow-up work that we hope that will come out of this webinar. So on behalf of the organizer, we thank you all. We thank all the participants that have participated, and we also thank the team that was behind making this possible. Thanks, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, Raula.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care and all the best. Take care of your health, particularly in these difficult times, so we can at least continue to speak on.
Yeah,
it's also important that
I would like to inform all of you that I was also under the COVID.
Right. Okay. I hope, Shabri, we are off the line.